name's Elliot. I'm 35 years old from Scott, Louisiana. I've been a lifelong athlete, so sports were always a huge part of my life growing up. I've got two older brothers and two sisters. I had to learn quick that life was about patience. If I didn't get a hold of my patience, then I didn't really have a good control over my emotions. And as a kid, I had no idea how important emotions were, or being able to control them, and how big of a factor that would play in my adult life. So just to kind of give you a fast forward of how I got into the situation that I was in, being a larger family, Christian background, we grew up Catholic. There was a lot of things and behaviors that we did that were condemned. So things were off limits, things were off the table, and it kind of gave us that interest. It gave me personally an interest in those things. And not to say that I was defiant or anything like that. It just, when someone told me I couldn't have something, it made me want it even more. So that's just a general broad, base of like kind of what shaped my personality. So I go through high school playing football, loved all the sports, football, baseball, track, wrestling. And I wrestled as a young kid. My dad was the coach, and both of my older brothers ended up being state champion wrestlers. So wrestling was a huge part of our growing up. And both of my brothers were quite a bit larger than me, so it definitely led to me gaining a lot of skill in that area. Although it wasn't my favorite, I was really more into football, and so I focused a lot of my time and energy on that in high school. And what I realized is I wasn't looking for the fun of the game. I was really wanting more attention than anything. I wanted people to watch and say, "Wow, that guy is good at something." Like this is something that I like tied my identity to, because there was so much attention on football in South Louisiana that it became something that I craved. Just having, the awards or the accolades, or, scoring a touchdown or catching a ball. Those things just became something that I was drawn to immediately. I knew I liked it. I liked the feeling of having the game on the line and making a big play, and then having my teammates give me credit for it. And I always used to say the number one addiction that I started off having was the tap on the helmet. Ding, after it was a big play or after a touchdown, I would have people come and tap me on the helmet and say, "Good job," or pat me on the back and say, "Great job, Ellie, you're doing amazing," blah, 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 and it just kind of led to this like reassuring or reaffirming that I was doing what I needed to do. And so, I played high school football, ended up going to play college in Arkansas, and I had very similar, experience there, although I had to earn it a little bit more because it didn't come as natural playing with, larger people and just more skilled and more talented guys. It became something I had to work for. So, the hard work led to me really truly finding myself and what my lane was, and that was being a leader in the locker room, and leader in the weight room, and on the field as well. Originally, I didn't always live up to that, but as the years went on in college, I kind of adapted into that role. But I had a game my senior year. It was a seventh or eighth game of my senior year. We were playing Southern Arkansas, and I caught a pass, and my foot was planted firmly in the ground. And as I looked to turn the other way to run, the guy was already like laying into my knee. And so my knee, basically, I took a helmet to the knee on the outside, and it smashed my knee into the ground, and my body continued to go forward. And so I tore my ACL, my PCL, my meniscus, and just about every ligament you could tear in your knee. It was a devastating injury. It was the worst injury I've ever had in any competition or anything like that. That injury ended up forcing me to not be able to jog or not be able to walk without a limp for almost 2 years. And so from 2012 to 2014, I was really struggling to walk, really struggling to run, and after football, basically lost my identity. It was like I didn't have anything to like say I'm that. This is what I do. No longer had the pats on the back and the taps on the head that gave me that constant reassurance that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I was prescribed pain medicine, and so that was kind of not the beginning, but that was the thing that got me onto the track that I figured I could not control. And that was one of those things where it was like I needed to feel better about the whole situation. So it was like like an easy fix or something that I gravitated towards to help me through those times. And, depression, really, it was depression. It was not getting the dopamine that I thought I needed, and those little interactions with humans that tell us that we're doing well and that we're doing good and that people like what we're doing. And I think coming from a large family where, you kind of get not tossed to the side, but you definitely get overlooked as a young person, 30 or 40 first cousins, a really large family. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters. My mom had 4. So the attention was the thing that I really craved. I really wanted people to like me. I wanted people to tell me that I was doing a good job. And so when I found these different chemicals, there's, also marijuana. It brought about community and, all this stuff. It really, it gave me a sense of, being understood. I think, so that's kind of a brief summary of, how I got started on my journey with, in recovery and, how things kind of got to a point to where they were unmanageable. So I was living this life. I was working as a Kentwood water delivery guy. So I'd deliver those big 5-gallon jugs that you put on the water coolers. That was my job, and I actually enjoyed the job. It was a physical job. I can get out and move some weight around, and I had a task to do, and it was a sales job, so it was performance based, and it was something that I was enjoying. Although I could not shake the pharmaceutical grab or pull towards me. I wanted that. I wanted more of the feeling that brought, and I didn't even know how bad it was. I really didn't, and it got worse and worse until one day I had a guy who went to Legacy. His name is Ted Arnwell. Ted, he stopped by my house and I was on a lunch break and he saw what I looked like. And, I was probably 145 pounds when normally I'd probably be about 180, something like that. And he saw the disc, the pale complexion in my face and the dark circles around my eyes. And he just had a deep concern for me as a man and as a young person who was struggling with some of the same things that he struggled with. So first thing he did was he gave me a list of things that he had struggled with and kind of wanted to grow a connection or a relation to why I should believe or listen to him. And as he was talking, I realized that we had the same, very similar situation going on with the things that we were doing. At least what I was doing at the time and what he had been through. And he was like, "Look, man, I can just see it in your eyes. I know it's you don't want this. He's like, and that was the first time I admitted to anybody that I had a problem. Right there, I was just like, I'm glad you're here right now. I'm glad someone sent you, and I know for a fact it was my higher power. Because if it wouldn't be for God, Ted wouldn't have reached out to me, and Ted wouldn't have stopped. And it's one of those life rafts. You hear the story about God. He sends all these things to rescue us, but it's up to us to like take the rescue. It's all up to us to grab the life raft and go up with him. No. So as soon as he started explaining to me what legacy was, I was immediately interested. And he started talking about, going into these old Indian cave dwellings like a kiva and where there's writings on the wall and there's a fire pit in the middle of it with a hole in the roof. And it's like these giant openings in these rock formations where people would gather and take care of their families and, multiple families would get together and protect themselves. And as soon as he started to explain that this was a real thing in life today, I was blown away. And I was like, wow, I have to figure out how I can get into these cave dwellings. It was like all I wanted to do is he was explaining to me how they would make fire and how, it was like we would use a fire kit, a bow drill, fireboard, a spindle, and how he explained to me how it worked. And I was like, there's no way that this is a thing that happens in our culture. I was like, there's no place like this. I couldn't fathom that this was a real thing. And so I immediately wanted to find out more. And he was like, okay, well, you have to detox first. You have to do this. And then, we have to go through this process where, you got to kind of get vetted a little bit. And so I started going through the process of trying to get accepted into legacy and getting through the physical necessities to get there. And once I realized that it was completely doable, I was all in. you know. So the hardest part was going through the detox and the medical detox place. But after that, when I got on the plane and I got to Salt Lake City, I knew I had made the right choice, and I knew that I was going to learn things about myself and then my environment that I could not learn any other way. I think the coolest thing was not having a phone. That was the number one thing that I was interested in because I knew I needed a total reset. I wanted to get rid of all my friends. I wanted to get rid of the people and the things in life that aren't serving me or not allowing me to serve my purpose. And so getting rid of the phone was like the number one thing that I was excited about. And he was like, look, it's only going to be 6 weeks. And I was like, man, 6 weeks sounds like a long time. And then I get there and they're like, yo, it's going to be 7 weeks. And then, 7 weeks goes by and they're like, yo, it's going to be like 9 weeks. That time I was in love with the place and I knew that I needed that extra time. My birthday was right around the corner. So they didn't want me to be out and about, on my birthday and, to have all those things calling me, or calling my phone or whatever. So, the counselors over at Legacy really knew what they were doing. The therapists are just very high quality. I had Devin, and he helped me to dig and to pull out a lot of things that I didn't want to say, a lot of things that I was shameful of and didn't really want to talk about. And, he was able to help me see where I had resentments in life, where they were just kind of like buried stuff that like just happens to us. That's not our fault. And it's not anyone else's fault. We just have to deal with them as a resentment because that's what they are. You can't go your whole life saying, man, I wish things were different, and then not acknowledge it, even though that thing is like supposed to be in your life. And it's just a natural part of some people's life, not a part of everybody's life. But, I grew up with sisters with disabilities, and it was an extremely, extremely humbling experience. It brought about a lot of patience and a lot of times where I didn't want the patience, so they were able to pull at some really hard truths for me. And, it definitely exposed myself to myself. And I was able to kind of start digging away and, carving away at the pieces of my life that I no longer wanted and didn't need and what that weren't serving me. And yeah, I was just getting to the carving out is, when we first got there, we sat in a group and they gave me a spoon. And so the first thing they did was present me with this spoon where I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? They're like, well, you can feed yourself for one. This is the only utensil you get for the entire time that you're here. And so you're welcome. It's a gift. I was like sitting there thinking, like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, how is it a gift, Well, what I didn't realize is that, 13 guys or 10 other people had took their time to make that spoon what it is. There's a carving out process. There's a harvesting process first. You have to get the actual wood from a tree somewhere. And then from there, everyone takes a turn and carves a piece of the wood away to come up with this blank, a wood spoon blank. And then from there, you chisel out the bowl and, use these tools to carve out this spoon. And it becomes more of a metaphor of the way that you can, carve away at yourself to nourish yourself. At the end, you use the spoon to nourish yourself. And I just saw that, thought that was super profound. And that there was, I thought it was amazing that there was a group of people who are all in on this same mission and helping you carve out yourself and helping you nourish yourself. And that was like kind of the second thing where I was like, all right, there's something more to this, this honorable manhood and this journey, the hero's journey that I want to learn more about. So like creating, once we started carving spoons for the new guests, I was a part of that. I became part of, the cultivating of another human's goodness, and nourishment. And that was just to me so profound, and sitting, using the spoon. And then also the next week it's like, okay, now you gotta learn how to build fire. And the best way to make fire is using a bow drill and a fireboard. So that was something that I looked at as a huge challenge, and I needed that in life. As a young man who grew up in South Louisiana, we were kind of a hard-nosed family. My father was a Marine, and I needed something like that I could do work to accomplish a goal to then get what I want. Like I have to do work, accomplish a goal to get really what I want in life. I can't just have somebody give it to me and expect for me to one, appreciate it, and two, use it to help myself. It was much better learning the process of, how to make fire. And those were just like the two things, those are the two pieces of work that we did. It was like things that you have to do physically with your hands that we consider work. That not only, number one, it gave me a mission, gave me something to like a task to work for. And then it also was like meditation for me to, just move, just be able to use my body to create something. And that is, to me, something that really stood out. The part about the program, the adventure side of it, is pretty amazing because each person in the group has their own individual responsibility. It's a designated responsibility before the adventure. We had one person who's the navigator, one person who's the cook, one person who takes care of all the equipment, and one person who's supposed to help break down camp. And there's a variety, and there's also a photographer. So there's a variety of different roles and responsibilities that are allocated throughout the group. That is the first kind of cool thing that Legacy does, to give young men a responsibility and then a task, and then the whole group comes together to make the adventure work. Whether it be going on a 10 or 15-mile hike. I'm not sure how far they're going these days, but a 10 or 15-mile hike, the first 2 weeks you're there just to really set the tone. And yeah, I think one, build your legs, and to build your mind and your body to like just keep moving forward. And it's one foot in front of the other. There's no way around it. So having those goals and those, like, knowing that we have a task to complete, we have to get to this water source, and you're just taking one step after another. When you haven't hiked like that, your entire life, and then all of a sudden you're tasked with doing this, it does something to, someone's soul. It does something to someone physically. It's a physical action that we can take moving in the right direction that will create strength. It'll create health. It'll give us wisdom about our environment and how to navigate this terrain. Like, if you're, just because it says 5 miles the way the crow flies, does not mean you're about to walk 5 miles. You might go 3 miles down a canyon and then 3 miles up a canyon and then across. So you went 6 miles, but you only went one way, 1 mile the way the crow flies. So it adds up. It builds resilience. It gives you unexpected turns and twists in life that is so much like life. Being out immersed in nature and having these canyons and these valleys to walk through and then get to the other side. A team gets together and, we have talks and we sit down and we eat and, we share strategies of how we're going to handle this. Just something so unique about the experience, and everything was so metaphorical. There's these guides, right? The guides who some guides have been through the program. Some guys are just survivalist, expert survival field guides. And it's just amazing to have such strong leadership there to like walk you through this path and like guide you down your journey of honorable manhood. And every time they say honorable manhood in the beginning, I would cringe. I'd be like, what is that? I don't want anything to do with that. And as I just got to know them, and I would see them, sometimes guides would make mistakes, right? And they would take ownership immediately, and they would say what they did wrong, and they would ask, what they could have done better, and they ask for feedback. And you see these men getting no credit at all from anybody. They're out in the middle of the desert with kids that probably don't care about them. And they're there to not only keep you alive, but to help you find yourself in the most tumultuous time that you've ever been a part of. It's just really cool to see the experience of these mentor guides and how they affected me in my life. It was very profound. But at the end of the day, we all get together and we sit down. We all make our camps separately, and then we sit down in a group and make a fire, use the fire building techniques. We all sit around the fire, but we have to take our shoes off and let our feet dry in the heat of the fire to where our toes can become dry. And also it helps so your feet don't get any kind of bacteria or any kind of fungus to where you can have any type of foot problems. I always thought that was very profound. We sat down and put our feet next to the fire. That was something that I really enjoyed. And as we're sitting there, with our shoes off, each person goes around and says one thing they're grateful for and one thing they're working on. And then we say a little prayer, and then the new person tells their story. And that's a space where everyone in the circle stops talking and the person that is new gets to tell their story to where everyone can kind of relate to them and get, a real genuine piece about them that they can take and use to help them moving forward. So that was like my first week there. That's pretty much how it went and how it felt having the space to do that. Like we talked about work. It's all about, for me, it was finding something that could distract me from my own thoughts long enough for me to have good thoughts. Like I needed to work, 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 keep myself busy until I was constantly thinking about how I can be better. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to just be a better person. I asked, the Holy Spirit to guide my thinking in this journey and to help me to create better thoughts because it's the thoughts that you let pass by or the thoughts that you let sit and make a nest in your head. And that's a whole skill that you have to learn. Do I let this thought fly away or do I let this thought build a nest in my head? And as a young person getting out of addiction, I needed those thoughts to just fly away. And I needed the holy thoughts and the thoughts that were going to nourish me to build a nest and to stay and to allow me to navigate this time where I really needed the Holy Spirit. I finished Legacy in 2015, and I've been on a roller coaster journey since then, but it has definitely led me to where I am today. Going to Legacy and being around such amazing people and nature and just allowed me to kind of find out what I want in life. What gifts do I have to give the world and what can I do to like give the world those gifts? At first I was thinking military. I really wanted to kind of just give back and I wanted to serve the country. But after, further thought and further research and development, I found MMA. Legacy helped me to get my knee back to where I could actually walk and hike through, all these different trails and, canyons and climbing and everything. It really helped me get my knee health where I needed it to actually attempt MMA. Like I thought since with my football injury, I wouldn't be able to do MMA because of the leg kicks. But after wearing the pack and hiking for 8, 9 weeks, I felt like my knee was finally strong enough to actually give it a chance and go to MMA as a sport and try to spread the good messages, what I call it. And that's like there's life after any kind of mess up. There's life after injuries. There's life that needs to take place. And what I needed to do was find out what my purpose and my passion was. And so I found that through training young athletes. So now I work with, athletes of all sports. We work with football, baseball, basketball, track, wrestling, you name it. We work with guys who are wanting to get faster, who are wanting to get stronger. And it's been a good way for me to just give back the things that I know that I'm good at, the things that I know that I like to do. And so working with the young athletes has been a way for me to really give my gifts back. MMA was something that I've always liked. And I think because I had a wrestling background and, football, I was really aggressive. I was always wanting to make contact. That was probably my favorite part about the game was the contact. And so I was like, what's the two to get? What's better than putting wrestling and football together and using it for MMA? I had a thought one day. It was really felt like divine inspiration or divine intervention or whatever you want to call it. I was meditating one day and it just came to me. You need to do MMA so that you could be a good influence on the younger generation because what's currently in place and the people that are involved in the sport are kind of giving it a bad name. So I want you to go in there and I want you to say the name, Jesus Christ as much as you can and assert yourself in that sport and create a reputation. That was kind of what it felt like I needed to do. So after my first fight, I finished with a 71-second knockout. I had absolutely zero formal training other than wrestling and football. I was practicing in my apartment for about a month before, and we're watching Mike Tyson YouTube videos before I took my first fight. And sure enough, I ended up getting a 71-second knockout. And from there, I knew that the same feeling that I was missing from football, I got it doing MMA, but times 1,000. And, so it was definitely something I was like, okay, I like this, but I also should be worried about this because this is something that I knew has come back to bite me in the past. But after being in the sport for about 10 years now, it helps you to deal with the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And you find yourself somewhere, grounded in the middle after every fight. It doesn't matter what happens. 2 days after, 3 days after, you're going to just go back to being the same normal person that you always are. So, allowing these epic performances and these disappointing performances. And granted, I've had more epic performances than disappointing. It's helped me to find that level ground no matter what and stay even through the highs and the lows. So currently, right now, I have an overall record of 10 wins and 3 losses. Five wins and 2 losses as a professional, with all 5 wins coming by first or second round finish. I'm currently the American Combat Alliance lightweight champion, and I just defended my title August 16th, and I look forward to defending my title again probably in November. And I have 3 more fights left on this contract with American Combat Alliance. If I can get 3 promising finishes on this contract, there's a really good chance I could get called up to, UFC or one of the larger organizations. So, at this point, I'm just really blessed to be able to do what I love, to help people along the way, and, hopefully be able to change not only my family's life, but the lives of anybody who's willing to help themselves, anybody who's willing to go out and get help. You know, I want to start a nonprofit, Miracle Magnets, for people who need miracles in their life. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart, to help out families with special needs, and then also families who have lost siblings from addiction. And I just want to give back and start helping out some of the people and some of the organizations that have helped me get where I am today. And so, a super huge shout out to Devin Nanton and Mike Hinkle and everyone over at Legacy is just super amazing. Derek Daly. It's just amazing to see what you guys are doing over there. It's amazing to be just a small part of it. If there's anything, I can do in the future, I definitely want to be a part of it.